Hi, welcome to the first of a series of B2B podcasts to help you improve and maximise your efficiency on marketing. So today we've got Samantha Tonge and Steve Judge from a new dynamic agency called B2Be Different. And my name's Chris Morris and I'm going to be your host today. And I have a creative consultancy. So what we'll do to start off with is talk about a little bit about how you lovely people first met. Sam, so talk me through it.
Yeah, so I live in Scotland now, just outside of Edinburgh, but I used to live in Ampthill in Bedfordshire, which is where Steve's agency Bonfire was based, and I was client side at the time, the strategic marketing manager, but I was also on the CIM, Chartered Institute of Marketing, local Bedfordshire board, which is kind of how we met, because we were chatting, weren't we, Steve, about potentially collaboration?
Yeah, and at the time I was also running a local sort of creative agency network where we could sort of sit down with peers and chat about the challenges of running an agency or anything in the world of creativity really. And one of the things that I always felt was missing was we can have an agency network, and there was the CIM network, which I learned about through meeting Samantha. Not initially, first off, that wasn't the first conversation, but then talking about how we could maybe bring the networks sort of together so that agency and marketing can kind of sit in the same forum, that sort of same non-informal format that both were already following. But unfortunately, Samantha moved up to Scotland, so that stopped there. But then we've kept in contact ever since, and more recently in the last few years with some sort of joint kind of client and sector interests.
Yeah, that's really interesting actually. So what was the motivation between you and Samantha setting up B2B Different?
Yeah, well, since then I'd launched my own agency. I tried to focus entirely on strategy, a strategic agency for engineering, and so almost every client I speak to, they were like, "Oh, you're the first agency that actually gets the technical side of things that can actually translate what we do. Can you not do it for us?" And so I ended up doing some delivery, but I can't. We're very small. We can't offer everything, and so speaking to Steve, who's also focusing on very passionate about the same sectors, looking at the same areas, it made sense to have that holistic approach, strategy and creativity.
And we were also finding that our clients, some of them, very long-standing indeed in the engineering and manufacturing sectors, were starting to, the 2020, the whole COVID thing changed their world, because they were used to trade events, and obviously they stopped. So they had to look at other ways of trying to sort of grow their awareness or lead generation. And we started talking to them more about digital marketing, which is something that was always kind of on the last thing on the list. Trade shows, websites, brochures, data sheets, they were always the priorities. But the world changed, which meant they could no longer be. The in-person became impossible for about 18 months. So they were asking us more and more about the how they could embrace marketing, how they could, and also look at branding. And that was where we started to work with consultants. And obviously that's how the conversation sort of grew into B2B Different with Samantha over the last sort of 6 months, really. So it's been quite an exciting transition, but it's one that we've all recognised that there are, with the changing world of work, but also the big focus on manufacturing as well at the moment. I think there's a time and a place for everything, and right now I think the manufacturing engineering sectors, there's a big opportunity there that they can capitalise on.
Yeah, it's really interesting you say that, Steve, because I think that probably the next thing we should go on to is sort of like taking a look at some of the manufacturers that you guys are working with and taking a look at some of their top challenges. It's multifaceted today. That like the business is a really challenging environment, and I'd be really interested for you to sort of give us some feedback on what do you think the top challenges, maybe the top 3 challenges are for clients today.
Yeah. So think we've gone for B2B different for a reason. I think the top challenge is standing out in an increasingly crowded marketplace and a very traditional marketplace. And I think from a strategic point of view, getting that foundation there. There are a lot of stats to back this up. It's not just the looking pretty for the sake of looking pretty. I think it's also a very fluffy thing, and it's not neither the strategy or the creative side. Actually, there are brand focused companies. Some PwC research showed that brand focused companies make double the profit of other companies in the same industry. Brand focused being ones that have a clear brand that they can express clearly with a brand proposition, they show clearly, and all their employees understand the brand and where they fit in it. So that's why that is so key. And also they're doing some research, some other research, the long and the short of it from Binet and Field, about making sure that you've got a balance of resources in your long term as well as your short term. And of course, your long term is usually more about that brand awareness, getting that really in-depth knowledge of your business within your target market.
So how are you finding that, Steve, from a creative perspective?
Well, it really goes back to it starts with the strategic piece. You know, for it's really, you know, what if a company can communicate well who they are, what they do, and who they want to speak to, all right, that makes our life a lot easier creatively because we've got a really good brief. But at the same time, the world's constantly changing, channels are evolving. You can lose yourself in insights and data at the moment in terms of what's trendy and what's not. But at the core of everything successful in brand, no matter how many channels we've got or where we promote the messages, it goes down to the messaging. If we can be really good, clear communicators of what the benefits of using a particular product or service are, and we can do that in a compelling way that stands out, then we'll succeed, or we'll be more successful than someone else who's not got those kind of things in alignment, along with who we're talking to. Because let's not forget that, you know, every company's not talking to every person and every other company on the planet. We do need to be more specific. And as Samantha mentioned at the beginning, that we call B2B different for a reason. And that was this component, the single most, I think, important factor in all of this is being able to stand out, as Samantha mentioned, in crowded markets and growing markets. And right now, with the opportunity that exists in the manufacturing and engineering sectors, it's more important than ever because the sector's growing. You know, we've moved up to 8th place in the world now, UK, not by volume, clearly, but by value. And that's a really exciting statistic, and something that a lot of companies may or may not be aware of, but something that we should be looking to, you know, capture for growth.
That's really interesting. So would you say that between you, that's probably the number one biggest challenge? Or
number one, yeah. That'd be, there are a lot of challenges.
I'm sure.
That'd be number one, yeah.
Okay. So from a secondary perspective, what would you say is typically the clients talking about?
I think one of the things that they might not be talking about, but something that's important to kind of understand and how it bears a relation to their brand and ultimately their marketing output, would be the difference between kind of differentiation and distinctiveness. And there's been quite a lot of talk about this on LinkedIn and other channels over the last sort of year or so. But, you know, differentiation is becoming harder and harder as everybody accelerates, processes get better, manufacturing materials, you know, products get closer and closer, and maybe more and more niche in some areas because of that. But generally speaking, it's becoming harder and harder to differentiate purely on technical or functional merit. So that's where the branding kind of comes in terms of, okay, what's everything else around this product? Who's the business? Who's the people? What's the culture? What's the reason that you exist? And distinctiveness helps also straddle that gap a little bit on differentiation, because distinctiveness is about standing out. It's being bolder, braver, maybe doing something that's slightly outside your comfort, but that's there for a reason. It's to get you noticed.
Yeah, I think that's an important point, and I think it's a really important point to make. You might have, even if you have the most exciting product in the world, it really is differentiated and completely different. People still need to, you still need to get your customers' attention, otherwise they're not going to know that it is. So yeah, distinctiveness is so important. It's not just about looking pretty, it's about being interesting and different and noticed.
I know you can talk to many clients, and they'll, when you do the first engagement and you're talking about the competitive set, you'll often speak to companies and say, we don't know why their product sells so well, because it's not as good as ours. Well, that's marketing, positioning, messaging, company culture, how they engage, where they're selling their products. And almost anyone you speak to can give an examples of that in their sector. And in one way, it's you can't understand it, but on the other hand, if the differences aren't being communicated clearly, then how is anyone else going to understand that? So I think
yeah, it's an easy trap to fall into, because we talk about, you know, engineering and B2B manufacturers, that they often make these really great products or do these really great services they're so proud of, and rightly so, but you need to talk the customer's language. Just listing all the features, it just doesn't cut it. It's how are you helping your customers solve their issues?
Yeah. You find, Samantha, that there's a lot of jargon within the industry.
Yeah, you see that a lot. I'll name no names, but I know one engineering company that I was working with was very good at using acronyms that they understood. At one point, they were even using the navigation on their website was their product codes. So you had to already know what the product code was to look at the information about the product, nothing about why you would want their product. And it is, they don't do that anymore, thankfully, but it's an easy trap to fall into.
Yeah, I think it's in that space as well, there's a lot of knowledge, and I think it's assumed there's even more shared knowledge. But lots of companies, as you mentioned, they have their certain nuances of ways of working, and our job's actually to try and just keep, you know, all of our collective roles in any marketing and creative project is to make sure that the message is clear, that it's in a language that your prospects and your customers and your staff and your suppliers can all understand, rather than trying to kind of out-clever the market with a phrase which means something that we already know well and a lot about. It kind of clouds, it stops people communicating effectively with each other.
Yeah. Samantha, do you feel, how do you normally go about trying to extrapolate that sort of information from a client? Because often it's so challenging, they're so ingrained and focused around the technical elements of their product. They often can find it quite challenging to articulate some of the softer, more values-based sort of values around some of their products. How do you go about that?
Quite often, usually what the best thing to do is get everyone in the room. So you've got your loads of people in the business, usually with customer knowledge. So you've got the customer service people who deal direct with customers. You've got sales people that are face to face with these people, all sorts of different areas of the business, even finance. If you get them in the room together with the people who have the product knowledge, that sort of crossover between, you know, what are the issues in the market, what's special about us, and that's where the magic happens. And you see light bulb moments often, sometimes even leaders of the business like, oh, I didn't know that was what was important to customers. And sometimes it's oh, I didn't, you know, a sales guy will be like, I didn't know our product did that our customers love that. And then you start to extract all of the messaging out of that. I think that's the best way to do it, to get all those knowledgeable people in a room together, because often it's all up here within different areas of business. It's just extracting that and yeah, and making sure that the people who understand the customers best and their side of it and can understand their living in their shoes are involved in the process.
And manufacturing and engineering, I think, is quite an interesting sector as well, because it's often a career for life. So a lot of the people that we work with in sales and marketing teams, or even managing director or CEOs, they might have been with that company for 30 years as an apprentice, and worked through shop floor, as in engineering floor. They've worked in nearly every function within the business, and that wealth of knowledge, as Samantha's mentioned, it's easy for them to forget how much they actually know, and that not everybody knows what they know. They can talk to you and you'll just be amazed by some of the anecdotes that they can share with you, and it's being able to tease that out of them, because to them it's business as usual, but to the outside world they're really interesting facts and figures that someone else might not know, but you've known for a very long time. There's hidden gems that are often uncovered when you talk to people within a business that they take for granted, and they forget that they're just as exciting now as they were when they knew those facts or figures or that specific piece of information. That's why I think it's such an exciting sector. It's just so much in there to uncover and promote.
I guess talking about the people side of the business there and the value that they add through their sort of knowledge leads us probably really nicely on to a sort of last subject, which is really about people, and culture. I mean, you've mentioned it you've skirted around the edges of it slightly, but you've mentioned it in almost every one of your answers. Do you find that that's a big challenge for businesses today?
Huge, especially in our sector. It's termed in manufacturing and engineering, they call it war on talent, because it's so hard to both attract and maintain talent. And I think sometimes it's easy to forget how important marketing is in the mix of that. You need to think about your internal communication. You need to remember that with your external communication, it's not just customers that your audience, it's also potential employees. And it's maybe a slightly different message for them. I think it's a huge problem in the sector, partly because there just aren't enough apprenticeship schemes. There aren't enough people that have those existing talents, and people need a mix of not just graduates but also experienced people, and it's tough. And then you've also touched on brand. You need to live the brand. The brand is the core of, if you're a person, it's who you are, your personality, and what you represent to customers and employees. Employees need to understand that, and obviously communication plays a key role in that.
And a big part of that now is obviously the hybrid working environment. Obviously, with manufacturing, there's a factory or an engineering space and QS and various other areas which need people, there to function and do the magic that they do in creating products and developing and releasing products. But equally, you've got this sort of hybrid model being used in other areas throughout the organization, where people are working from home, in the office, they've got breakout pods, all of that being embraced into the culture of a business as a modern way of working. We're seeing more and more companies asking us, well, what does this mean and how can they implement that? Because they want to retain people. And also, as the speaker on specific business the other week, what they found is that they've, in diversifying, they've got more and more niche specialists within the business now, rather than someone who knows a lot about a lot of things. Where the market and the product applications have evolved, now got more and more very specific specialists on specific tasks for a product. When they leave, the knowledge is lost because they might have been working on an R&D project. Yes, everything's noted in Slack or whatever the communication channels they're using, or project management, case management systems. But there's an intellectual part which can't be transferred on a notepad or in project notes. The way someone thinks and the way they approach a problem is not transferable because we're all individuals. And that knowledge transfer, there's a big gap now in knowledge transfer. So retaining staff's become even more of a priority, and that a lot of that will be down to, you know, the companies that nurture their talent the most, provide the most, you know, hybridized workspaces, comfortable workspaces, and places where they feel valued, and also be part of a business that they believe in.
So what other advice could you give to a company to sort of retain their staff, Samantha?
Well, obviously they have to. I think what with everything marketing, you need to understand the situation first. You need to find out what's important to them, what is of interest. So you've got to have the right product. Think of it as a product. A career is like a product for the customer. First get that right, and then figure out what's what's important to them and what's special about you. It's exactly the same process as if it's a product for a customer. It's exactly the same thing, really. And speaking their language, and being where they are, which is not necessarily where your customers are. So we're talking about B2B here. So one of your main social media tools is going to be LinkedIn. Potential employees, especially younger ones, you might have to think about all sorts of things, Instagram, TikTok, outside of your traditional communication tools and channels.
So you've both come up with some fantastic points there. It's really, really interesting. I would like to segue back though to a little stats that I found the other day, which is all about brand, which was obviously what you felt the top challenge was. And it came from a really interesting survey that was done by a company called Up to the Light, who actually represent agencies and clients. So what they do is they go out and they do market research on behalf of agencies to ask clients, there's about 650 clients, what is it that they like and they dislike about their agencies, and they also talk about some of the biggest challenges that they have. Super interesting survey. 76% of clients stated that they're unable to give as much consideration to long-term brand building as they'd like to. Now that clearly really resonates with some of the biggest challenges that you've found. But what's your view around that, Steve?
I don't think it's that companies don't want to embrace branding, be brand led. I do think sometimes, and one of the things that's drawn us sort of closer, myself and Samantha, closer together over the last 6 months is this need to make sure that the internal marketing resource and the teams is looking at help them, how can they communicate to the wider senior stakeholders board within the businesses around investing more time in looking at brand building activities, as opposed to more of a kind of more of the day-to-day kind of marketing, sort of, more time sensitive activations. And that's something that we've been doing a lot of over the last 6 months, is going in and running, helping. I wouldn't say selling, that's not the right word. It's being able to support the rationale as to why the business needs to invest a bit more time initially and then maybe money later in building the brand. And it's really good for us as well, because we get to kind of understand a little bit more about the challenge that they face, and also the reasons why and why not, because there's a lot of the reasons why you wouldn't do it are sometimes they to us who kind of do this sort of stuff all the time come across as slightly rational, but those fears are real in terms of brand awareness. You can measure conversion. Awareness is a very hard thing to measure, top of funnel, and then feeding right the way through the tunnel. But if people aren't aware of you, they can't consider you, and therefore they can't buy. So I do think being able to support businesses sell the importance of branding, I think has been one of the biggest probably the biggest learnings in the last 6 months. That it's not about just going in and saying, hey, let's do some branding campaigns. There is a process that needs to be followed, and there are conversations that need to be had, and there are hearts and minds that need to be aligned, which takes us back to the people as well. Everyone needs to be aligned in what we're doing. It's very hard to push something in if there's only a small number of people within the business looking to push something forward. It's very hard to get enough traction, which then would immediately lead to not enough time being able to focus on the activity.
Yeah, and I having been on the other side of it, having been client side for a long time, I totally understand these frustrations. I think most marketers do understand how important brand awareness is. So I think it's important that B2Be Different takes part in that, and part of our job is to educate the wider market, to help educate those senior people, the the finance director, because this stuff really makes a huge difference to the bottom line. I mentioned stats earlier about you can make twice the margins of your competitors, and the Binet and Field research, it is a very rough rule of thumb, but in B2B you should be putting 50% of that 50% of your resources into that long term. Otherwise, over time, you're going to start to lose sales, let alone not increase. And it's another trap that's easy to fall into. It's worrying about tomorrow, making sure that you've got enough leads in now. Yes, that's important. That's the other 50%. But a lot of marketing managers have KPIs that are all about the current year, not about over the longer term, and that's an issue that they face. And plus, they're firefighting. Your average marketing manager has too many plates to spin. But maybe we can help there.
I think it's interesting because it's a good and a bad anecdote actually. But Apple, one of the largest consumer brands in the world, was originally a B2B brand. They built machines for the creative industry. And look at where they are now. Now, not everybody's going to go from there to a £1 trillion corporation in the time they have. But what it does is you look around you, you look at more and more B2B brands, and the successive ones like Intel Inside, Gore-Tex, Lycra, all ingredient brands. They're all manufacturing products that go into other products. That could be said for any supply chain. Manufacturing has at times very long supply chains with lots of people in to get to final assembly, like automotive, for instance. And there is value in selling the brand all the way up through the chain. Not for everybody, but where there's an opportunity to do so, it provides a huge amount of value to that business and the people that are buying the products as well, and then selling those products on. So I think there's a whole number of brand strategies that they're there, but they're not always obvious, because we sometimes take what we see for granted as well. That all those brands I just mentioned do things for a very specific reason, and they were all B2B businesses, but they're also, I know they're in consumer products, but everything else ultimately is being consumed by someone, whether it's a product or a service, and we're all people at the end of the day.
Yeah, they're all very, very valid points. So I'd like to thank you both so much. It's been some really valuable insight. I'm sure the audience and all the great advice you give your clients as well, I'm sure they're really appreciative of that. But just to let the audience know that we've got a number of these up and coming podcasts. We can cover a plethora of different subject matters. But if you do have a subject that you'd like to talk about, please get in contact. Also, if you'd like to have a one-to-one with Steve and Samantha, just go to the website, contact us, and I'm sure they'd be absolutely delighted to sort of help and give you any advice they possibly can. So, Samantha, Steve, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well done.
Thank you.
And yeah, we look forward to the next one.
Indeed. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you.